very, very quiet.
I'm reading up on cinema verite for that first question in the Q&A. I actually didn't know what it was.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours. I'm Alex. And if this is the first time you're here, I'm going to give you a little bit of an orientation so you understand what you're looking at. You might be an attendee or a panelist. If you're wondering how you ended up there, well, the panelists tend to get here early. We open the doors at 6 a.m. People start coming in. We mostly talk tech, but sometimes not. At 6 a.m., we're having our coffee and kind of getting started and getting going. So that can change a lot. At 6:30, we distribute the Discord link. If you want to join Discord, there's about 350 of us up there chit-chatting about this all day, 24/7 it seems. So you can join, but you have to be here at 6:30. We put it out. Once I announce it here, it's already gone. But the Discord link is distributed at 6:30. At 6:40 to 6:45, we start doing mic checks. If you're not here by the time the mic checks start, you won't be on the panel. So especially now that we're only 4 away from being full. So I was like, I looked at it today. I was like, how did we get here? So that's how you get on the panel. Just make sure that you have good audio, good video, and a good internet connection. And if you feel like joining us, go ahead and raise your Zoom hand to join, but not now. You have to come in early. Sometimes when I say that, people raise their hand immediately, and it's too late. So now that you're here, what you want to do is you want to ask questions in the Q&A. So there's a Q&A at the bottom. Ask the questions down there and put questions in there, make them 4 to 6 lines maximum. And that's the outer max. Please try to write them in a way that is easy to read. Poor Chris has to read all of these questions. And if you make it hard and convoluted for him to read, it makes him, he doesn't look as good on air. And you know, Chris really likes to look good on air. So try to make it easy for him to read, keep it short. We generally we'll just dismiss any questions that are longer than 6 lines. So just know that that's kind of the process. And if it's hard to read, Chris may choose just to pass it. So it's really on you to make a nice clean question that we can ask. Don't ask questions in the chat. So you can, but just know that people in the chat are going to answer those questions, not us. So if you ask, want to keep the questions in the question and answer, don't put chat in the question. So chat is for chat, questions are for questions. Don't try to cross those beams if you can. Now we have 1 hour where we answer questions. The second hour, what we call the second hour, we talk about something specific. Today we're going to talk about working with, we're talking about crikey kits. So a lot of us bring kind of emergency crikey kits to what we do. And so we'll be talking about the kinds of things that we put in our crikey kits for an hour. But we talk about all kinds of things. This is the first time you're here. Earlier this week, we talked about virtual weddings. And then yesterday, we were talking about volumetric capture and everything in between. So anything that has to do with slinging bits around is something that generally is fair game. On Saturdays and Sundays, we have a 2-hour question and answer from 7 to 9. And then on Saturdays, we continue to go on because we just can't get enough. And we talk about more technical talks. And so tomorrow, Nick Justison's coming in at 9 a.m. He's going to talk about Unreal. A lot of us are getting excited about Unreal. And we really see Unreal as something that is going to affect meetings, going to affect education, going to affect broadcast, as well as games and AR and VR and all the things that we think about it for. And so a lot of us are trying to get our head around it. And so that's what we're working on there. Then at 10 o'clock, Steve Bays, who is a former senior product manager for Final Cut, gives us tips and tricks, deep cuts into Final Cut, things you probably didn't know it could do. And by the way, Steve is in our Discord. So it is the #1 place in the world to ask questions about Final Cut right now. At 11 o'clock, I'll be talking about making motion graphics for broadcast, just basic how to build lower thirds and countdown clocks and super sources and that type of thing. So we'll have an hour of that discussion at 11. And then at noon, a lot of people wanted to know more about networking. So how do we what is a static versus DHCP? What are VLANs? How do we, take care of that? A lot of us do streaming. So how do we understand that? So Aaron Mailer, who's been my go-to internet guy for, network IT person for a decade, is going to come in and answer questions. So that's what's going on Saturday. It's a long day. And then Monday we start all over again. So anyway, that's kind of that's the spiel. That's basically how we get going. And if you like what you see here and you want to share it with friends or the internet, you can use this link that I just posted there. What we're trying to do is see how big we can get this and if we can get it to something sustainable before COVID and people start going back to what they're doing. So if you like this, please share it with other people. We want more people like you. So Chris, questions. What do we got?
Yeah, the first question I'm going to read to you is from Andrew Chinitzi, I believe. He's shooting a doc and most of it's done, but COVID, lockdown. He has a couple more interviews to do. He could do them over Skype. He's wants to know if there's any other more high quality ways to do it. I'm going to throw out one thing I've seen many times is do it on Skype, put it on a nice monitor, on a nice set. You can do little camera moves, just let them talk on a monitor. I'm just going to throw that out just from an art standpoint, shoot the monitor beautifully. Any other ideas?
I think that one thing that I would think about is trying to do some version of a double end, so basically, think about how you can have someone be, you can set it up over Skype where you're doing the interview, but you can actually adjust, have them adjust everything and then you can execute that interview, but you don't have to be there. So we've done a lot of that with Q&A where we bring the person who wants to ask the questions, we bring them in over Skype. We still have cameras there and lights and mics and everything else. And so you could theoretically send them a kit. If you send them a kit with a switcher, you could even shade the cameras and everything else remotely, if you set it up correctly. So there's kind of a way for you to put that together. You can see the problem with not being able to shade your camera right now with my camera because the sun keeps changing and I have to go over and adjust it. So if anyone asks, like, why do we need shading on cameras? I don't have it set up for this. This is my remote kit. And I don't have it set up and I'm already feeling very constrained. So thinking about how you can manage that, you could theoretically send out a kit to do that, or maybe get a person. I mean, I think that we're in social distancing, but I think that, and travel's hard, but it's not out of the question to have a person locally kind of manage that for you. But you want to have control over that. And the key is doing something where you can talk to them. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, from story first concept, what is your concept of the imagery? And how does that move the story forward? I think you can always use the image if it's in its correct context. In other words, you could use a 4:3 aspect ratio if you keep it in that. Don't try to stretch it out and make it goofy. So I think working backwards from story, how to ask that question, not just from a technical point of view, but from a story moving forward point of view. So
yeah, and I think the hard part that I always have for this is that it depends on what the rest of it was shot in. If you shot the whole thing in Super 35 and it looks gorgeous and everything else, how is that person who's getting interviewed feel about showing up being intercut with something that was shot with a much better camera? And so that becomes kind of a complicated process from a political perspective. I just know that if I shot a bunch of high level people and one of them was, or two of them were Skype and the other ones were shot on an Airy, people would be bitter. That person on Skype would be bitter. And so you just have to kind of keep that in mind. And you can try to work around it, but I'm just telling you, like, I've done this a bunch of times and they will be upset that that happened.
The doc that I'm doing has 1976 archive footage. So it's obviously.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine.
But we got to keep it in the context of its moment. And that's where I love Chris's point of view. Just trying to keep your visual image in the context of itself, rather than trying to make it that something.
It is. I think that the hard part is that I just really, I look at it as I've worked on a lot of projects where we cut corners on some of the interviews for whatever reason because of issues or whatever. And it just every time you look at it, you have to live with it. And it's if you're taking old footage or you're taking something else and it's obvious that you're doing it or it's part of the context that you're talking about there, I think it's fine. But you just really want to think about how you're going to be able to pull that off where it doesn't feel like the viewer or to you or to the person that's on there that they got a short, got the short stick. and that's the thing you got to be kind of careful of. Jeffrey?
One thing that local TV stations have been doing, which I find kind of weird, but it's been working, is they've been taking their cameras and pointing it at their phones doing FaceTime. It's similar to that monitor thing that Chris was talking about, but it also has an interesting level where you're still using the same camera, but you do have that away feel to it.
Yeah, and I think that the hard part there is that, I know I'm going to make people upset about this, but for the most part, news and local TV is disposable content. They're not going to try to sell it or resell it or whatever. It's unless there's a big news item, no one's ever going to see it again.
There's a value to toilet paper.
Right. No, yeah. But what I mean by that is that you can experiment. The great thing about it is you can experiment a lot. You can do a lot of things. You can play with the idea. You can do those things, and you don't have to live with anything down the road. It's just like, oh, okay, well that worked or that didn't work. And so what I think was great about that kind of content is that they are often on the front edge of experimentation and kind of pushing the outer envelope of that process. But when we start getting into film, the problem is that that's the permanent record forever, of whatever you made. Now, it just depends on the budget and what you're doing, but that becomes kind of a thing, that like I went crazy. If you go up on TikTok, you'll see I haven't updated it for a while because I got a job and got really busy, but you'll see the McDubbies, which is my kids doing, and some of them started with iPhones, but then you'll see the last one we shot with a 6K, and I'm going to enjoy that. It's a really dark, it's a dark TikTok, but I'm really going to enjoy, like when they're older, it's going to be really funny that they get to show their friends. And I'm glad that I shot it at a really high res, and so you don't want to stop yourself from making content without that, but you want to think about where it's going to end up, especially if you put a lot of work into it already. Go ahead, Jeff.
So going back to their question saying that getting anything higher quality, getting them to do anything besides Skype is going to be tough. Just getting them to get on a pair of decent quality Apple earbuds would improve quality of audio so much. Getting them off the built-in mic and getting rid of that echo cancellation and all these things.
Yeah, but I agree, and I would highly recommend figuring out a way to send a kit. If I was doing a documentary, I would figure out a way to send them a kit, of something, a good mic, good camera. I would, if not, I would. Admittedly, I would put off the production if I can't send a kit out. Like I wouldn't put a bunch of Skype stuff into a doc, unless I had done it a lot already. I don't know what the budget is of the doc, but
and if you're going to make it a quilt, make it. That's a part of your aesthetic of your feature, of your document. Yeah. It's a hodgepodge, but embrace the hodgepodge and know that you've got archival footage and an old guy that's going to die. So you got to grab whatever you can. I mean, that's the beauty of a documentary.
The way I think of it is kind of Clint Eastwood. What was the movie with the sniper? Can you guys hear me okay?
American Sniper.
Yeah, American Sniper. He lost the Academy Award because he used a plastic baby because he was in a rush. Like they wanted to do that shot. They want to do that shot when the awards came up, everyone kept on talking about the plastic baby, and he was up there for that. I mean, he was pretty much in that zone, and I think of things like that a lot when I'm doing productions of, do I really want to put a plastic baby into the shot?
Well, and there's the difference between a narrative and a doc.
Yeah. Well, but I'm just saying that applies to many things, as a filmmaker, as a creator, you'll do something that, and sometimes you have to, and there's a lot of things that we do have to do it. But if you're doing something that sizably drops, or significantly drops the quality of your execution, you will, as a creator, you'll look at that and regret it. There's a shot in Star Wars where in episode 1, there's a shot where the Queen ship, basically it just jumps to hyperspace. It's like a really quick shot. It's like 28 frames of the Queen ship. And the specular highlight on it is horrible. It was horrible. Somehow I got 2 layers on top of each other, and I got 2 layers on top of each other. And so they were twice as bright as they should be. And they're kind of blown out in the center. and it just is a horrible shot. But they were in the mode of like, it's a 28 frame shot. It's good enough. George was like, it tells the story. Boom. It's approved. And I was horrified that it got approved. It was not what I had been working on. It wasn't the render, and every time I see that movie, I don't see that movie that often. It's not going to win Academy Award. But every time I see that shot, I just cringe. like I was like, oh, like that. And so that's all I'm saying. As a creator, you just want to try to figure it out. If it's something you put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into, you want to make sure that you don't just say, well, I had to get it out in a month. Well, do you really have to get it out in a month? There's so many things that I've done that I did in a rush. I rushed it because I thought it was going to be important. And being another week or two or a month out wouldn't have made any difference in the long term. And I gave up something for it. I'm going to move on. I'm going to move on to the next question. We spent a lot of time on that one. Let's go. Next question, Chris.
This will be fun. Philip Shane is doing a documentary also, wants to be able to film verite. He's asking, is it a crazy idea to control a drone remotely over the internet?
Well,
Basically illegal.
it's illegal. There's that.
There are
but
outfits that are doing this. X-Rotors, for example.
yeah, you can. Here's the thing: is
Within what proper
as far
license?
as you would have it, you'd theoretically have an operator that's local that's accountable for the drone to keep it legal. The waypoint, controlling it over waypoint would make sense. Like you can set waypoints of where you want to go with the drone. So as over the internet, that's easy. I mean, like for instance, I do shots where I build the best shots that I do with a drone are waypoints. I rehearse them, I figure them out, and I set it all up of this is how I want it to work, and then I play it out. That's going to be oftentimes a better shot for a big grand shot of something. You're not going to have too much latency to do anything high, anything complex is going to not be something that you can do over the internet, and there's a high probability. Most of these have so much safety in them now. It's not, you're probably not going to have too much trouble, but that's something to consider. Chris, comfort.
My question is whether or not he's trying to fly this thing outside the house or inside the house. He said the guy's a video game developer, so I'm assuming he's trying to fly this thing inside the house and just practice social distancing. But I don't even think that's possible, is it?
He's definitely fly drones inside the house.
and that.
But that's much higher. If you're trying to fly indoors, that's much higher risk than outdoor. You have very little room for error, and so. I don't know. A lot of the tools that I would use typically for that I don't think I would recommend. I would rather coach somebody on the ground than try to fly it myself if I was doing it indoor. Now, I don't think that's always going to be the case. I think, as we, build like LiDAR models of our houses, which I have for mine. Of course, everybody has a LiDAR scan of their house. But that's going to give you a lot of information that you could theoretically design, and if you think about and where you could have sensors that are really giving that device a location within 6 to 8 centimeters or 6 to 10 centimeters, you'd have a pretty good chance of making that work. Mickey?
As a mixer, I say sound ?
Well, with drones, it's never about the sound. You're going to hear I don't know. For me, you always know you're going to put something over top of it because all you're going to hear is engine noise. I mean, that's kind of the, everything we see that's cool with drones, we forget that there was a that was going on when we actually shot that video. I always think it's funny because it's when you look at the raw one and then you add some orchestral music and it sounds really great and you feel like you're floating. And then when you see the raw footage, it's just this really high pitch buzz. Okay, next question, Chris.
Weed whacker.
Yeah.
For you Windows guys, what CPU memory usage app for Windows PC would you recommend?
Anybody? Nobody? Yeah, go ahead.
I don't bother with it. It's not that big of a concern for me.
To not have CPU, not know what your CPU. Not know what your CPU usage is.
Oh, I can see it on the PC Task Manager under Performance. That's all there available.
Okay.
If you right-click the Start menu and go to the Task Manager and then hit the second tab on the Task Manager view, you'll see Performance for your CPU, your Ethernet, your GPU. Everything's right there.
Okay, there you go. Gary? You guys have to get better at unmuting. I'm just letting you know you have to come in fast when you get called. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry,
Go ahead,
guys.
Gary.
Yeah, resource manager, resource monitor, same thing.
Awesome. Chris, next question.
This is an old story. What mic is good for recording a vocalist, a singer?
Okay, so we've got a couple. Yeah, it depends on the vocalist and the singer. I mean, I would say that you got to find the right one. Jeff, do you have any Jeff Francis, do you have any input on that?
AKG 414, what Mickey's talking into.
Okay, there you go. AKG
good versatile
414. Choice. Yeah, I've got some.
Yeah.
I've got it. Yeah, go ahead, Tucker.
Yeah, and I would second that with the SM7 you're talking into for a male vocal.
Yeah, especially
Yeah,
if
it
they're
all
screamer rock.
depends. It all depends. Depends on the voice. Depends on the genre. Yeah, there's no one answer for it.
Victor. And then Bill. Victor.
Dynamic mic, so you can use it both on stage and for recording handheld. Doesn't look like your normal recording mic, but works pretty well. And then the Mojave Audio MA50 is a really large diaphragm for 600.
That's great. Bill.
On my side, having done voiceover for about 1,000.
People in here for me to have people jump in. Oh, go ahead, Bill. Maybe it was just a delay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, probably
Okay,
was. The internet's weird today. Having been a professional voiceover guy for about 1,000 years, I have walked into studios and stood in front of maybe 200 different kinds of mics. They all worked. Every time the spot got processed, got put on the air, and it worked fine. Mics are, the reason there's 1,000 mics out there is because they all have little differences in their characteristics, their patterns, how well they work against one voice or another, which depends. With a thin, reedy voice, maybe you need a little more bottom end. You're going to find a different mic. If you have a lot of bottom end, maybe you don't want that and you want something that has less top end. So this is like cooking. How much salt you add depends on how salty the ingredient was that you started with. And you have to do each recipe separately.
Fenwick?
I'm shocked at how many vocal things I'm seeing, COVID era, where people are using like their podcast mic to sing into, and I've seen a lot of people singing into a Shure SM7B, and I've never thought of it as a singing mic, and I gotta say I really like it.
Mickey, last one.
Right. Yeah. Just to put my 2 cents in, I probably have like a couple dozen mics, but for vocals, like 70% of the time, I end up using either the 414 or a U87.
Great. And who makes the U87?
Neumann.
Yep. Okay. And I have a couple of Neumanns that I like a lot. The problem with them is that I got to make sure that they are clean. You have to have a really good environment for them because they just pick up everything, and so you can hear it. You can actually hear it now that they've moved NPR hosts home. I can hear their house. like you can hear this this roomy area because those mics are super twitchy.
Let me pop in on that, because if you have a really good voice, I'm sitting here in a Neumann TLM 103, but I have a voice booth, and that's why it's fabulous. I can whisper and everybody can hear me whisper because it has incredible sensitivity, but only in a prepared environment.
Yeah. Absolutely. Chris, go ahead.
All right. Alex, what's the industry standard for a WAN bonding failover for must work, can't fail type of live streams?
I don't know if there's an industry standard. I think that for video, if you're trying to get video out of the building, live view is probably the most popular one as far as that goes. Live view is the most reliable that we've had. We've used TBUs and Dejeros, and we've rolled our own with Pep Waves, and there's a lot of different ways to bond out that. But typically, what I would do is rather than trying to bond do something else, what I like to have a lot of control on both ends. And what I prefer to do is have a live view that gets me back to a known location where I'm doing the encoding at that point. And so, and there's a whole bunch of reasons for that, but get it out of there. And so, we've experimented with a lot of different things, but we keep on coming back to the live view for that solution. Go ahead. Next question. I can't hear you, Chris.
How are people monitoring outages and latency in real time?
So what I do, I mean, people can raise their hand and let us know what they do. I use our stuff is streaming through a Meraki. So at that point, we have a lot of data. So once it's going through that router, I can open up that router. I can see how my bits are going, and then I can go from there. Looking at down detector a lot to make sure that if our platform is coming apart, we can kind of check it. So if we're going to YouTube or Facebook, we can make that work. Next question.
Favorite rental houses that ship gear to you by mail? I use borrowed lenses, always looking for.
You muted yourself in the middle of that question. Whatever you're doing,
I did
try
it.
the space bar.
I did it. No, it's not the space bar. I'm not using the space bar is the devil. It's latency. I dismissed it. Other rental houses that deliver by mail. What are your recommendations?
Yeah, go ahead, George, and then Jim. Nope, you're still muted, George. Hey, Tucker, we want to get people to, we want to do a test with folks, and they have to come up fast, or we're gonna note which ones they are. People in the audio test, you got to have your audio working so that you can come out of this really fast when we throw it to you. George, go ahead. Nope, you're still muted. Okay, Jem, go ahead.
I use Lens Rentals, which is also Lens Pro to Go. I've had good experience. There's also some issues with Zoom today. It's pretty laggy. I think that might be part of it.
Go ahead, George.
Lens Rentals.
And and as far as like when you get into the larger delivery of that process, I mean, most of the larger firms will rent you gear and send it to you. So when we rent a lot of stuff from somehow it just jumped out of my head. Anyway, I mean, most of the larger rental houses will ship. It's just a matter of cost. I mean, we have whole kits, shipped to us from a variety of different places. So you just have to ask them. One of the things to think about when you're thinking about rental, once you start moving past, just renting lenses and basic cameras, is you want to start establishing the your credit rating with everybody, or you have to fill out a lot of forms with everybody. So Able Cine, other ones there that are there. You want to build up that group with them before you need to do it for the job, because sometimes it takes a couple days. So you go, oh, I need to rent something from somebody tomorrow. You might not be able to get the paperwork done by tomorrow. So always think about that. And against that, you need to oftentimes have insurance. So you want to think about, your insurance policies and how that works. And so, that all starts to stack up, that you just want to think about that. And VER/PRG, that's what jumped out of my head for some reason. But VER is where we've ordered a lot of stuff. You just have to know that VER is really busy. The gear gets a lot of wear. So you don't want to show, generally, I don't want VER to deliver on the same day, because I want time to look at the gear to make sure that it's actually working. Because I would say a solid 20-25% of the gear I get from VER has some kind of anomaly, where a dial doesn't work, or an output doesn't work, or the Teradek doesn't connect to each other. The bolts don't connect to each other. Little things like that. Not that that's ever happened to me or that I'm bitter. Jan, go ahead.
You can go to Four Wall. They bought Wagner out of Texas, so they've got a lot of lenses. Also, and Bexell out of Hollywood.
Yeah, Bexell, and Bexell is all over. So Bexell is another one that we rent. We rent a lot of audio equipment out of Bexell. We've definitely done a lot of that rental from them as well. Next question, Chris.
Damon Hamath is asking about Switcher Studio, the Pro version. Is it reliable, or do you have any other recommendations?
Hello, Damon.
Hey, Damon. It's good to hear from you. John, go ahead. You're still muted. Not fast enough. There you go. Nope, still can't hear you. Double muted. See, we got all these complex rigs so that we sound good. But then we can't
sorry,
hear
and you think I know how to do this as a professor. Cinemaker has a nice product that is integrating with Zoom, very similar to Switcher.
And explain Switcher Studio, because I haven't used it for a little while.
Well, Switcher Studio and Cinemaker let you use the iPad as the switcher, and typically feeding iPhones or iTouches or iPads as the cameras. Both of them basically do live streaming. Both of them can record to the cameras and then export to Final Cut Pro to do an edit. So you can do a stream at whatever you're going to do, and then later on do a full high quality video edited in Final Cut. I've used them both. They have different flavors. I like Cinemaker. A lot of people like Switcher Studio.
Yeah, and I think that I play with a lot of those things. I think I'm not generally super excited about wireless in general. So I wouldn't, I unless I have like a really mission critical. I mean, if I don't have a mission critical event and I'm just having fun, or if I'm doing a student project or something like that, using consumer wireless for something is something I would do. Otherwise, the minimum requirement would be using a Teradek bolt with that's running at about 25% of what they promise. Is about what I would do for moving those things around. I don't, it's just a matter of whether it's mission critical or not. This is
what I do is I do it with, I don't do it wireless when I'm mission critical. I use Ethernet to the iPhones. I did a presentation for the UN on a studio and a backpack where we were able to send a four iPhone camera, green screen and lighting in a FedEx medium box, studio and a backpack. Then it was using Cinemaker.
Okay, I'm going to move forward here. The next question, I want to talk, and this is actually something I typed in also, but it disappeared. NDI in Microsoft Teams. Is this a big deal? Should we be talking about this? And if it works, does that mean I can get my Microsoft Teams video feeds into Mimo Live? Question.
It should be. I mean, you should be able to get it into Mimo Live. I don't know whether it's Windows or Mac only, or Windows only, or includes the Mac, on that feature. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I've been using Skype for whenever I have to do one-on-one interviews. The only problem, of course, is they put on the little watermark, which you kind of got to hide if you don't want it. But with Teams, something like that, if you're recording something or you're displaying it to a classroom or anything like that, then you can use that to really send it off in a higher quality.
And specifically, I think that this is specifically with Teams, the new Teams stuff, where it's going to theoretically put everybody, basically send out all the ISOs, from it, so you can get everybody, exported out. So instead of just having one that goes out, I mean, theoretically, you can have everybody going out on an individual feed over NDI. So I'll be really interested to see how that works. Sky, go ahead.
Yes, from behind the curtain, I did see NDI backstage, and obviously we were running on Teams coming out of Redmond over the last week.
I mean, the number one issue that we've seen with NDI and Skype has been audio, and MJ mentioned it, or Brett Ramsey mentioned it in the chat, but we see that over and over and over again, to the point where I'm not ready to use it because I'm afraid, because it doesn't seem that it's predictable. It's not predictable of when I'm going to have audio issues, or when I experimented with, I see other people talking about it. So it's coming up often enough that I go, I'm not ready to do something that is going to have that audio issue. And so I continue to experiment with it. I'm excited about the idea. I admit that the way I approach these is very different, where I like the idea of having a single machine that's putting out all of these outputs. I'm a little concerned about having a single machine that's putting out all my outputs, my whole show. What I have right now is, if I have individual issues with folks, or if I have individual issues with people, I have every Skype connection on its own computer. And I know that sounds really heavy and really painful, but it's super powerful if you're doing higher end solutions is to give everything a blade that it can manage. But I do think that anyway, I think it's going the right direction. I wouldn't put it into production today. So Chris, go ahead.
Ed Rubin, hey Ed, says, what would you folks suggest for getting both IFB and backup audio over phone for a Zoom conference? Basically, there's a bunch of things going on there.
So you got a Zoom conference, and what you want is we want to have IF in ear and a backup audio. I mean the
Unity Cloud.
That's what I was going to say. Unity, or I mean, if you had the hardware, I mean, I would use ClearCom because I have ClearCom, and I still like the ClearCom app better than the Unity app. But I think that Unity Cloud otherwise would be the right one. And we talked about this last week or earlier this week actually about basically doing interpreters where we sent out one feed from His Holiness the Dalai Lama's talk, and that went out to people all over the world or all over Asia. They did the interpretation in real time. It all came back in via Unity. Then using Dante was passed to QL1, which then embedded it. We then embedded that back into the SDI signal and then streamed it out to 14 languages to about 1 million people. And it was relatively clean and very low latency and high quality.
Is Unity really high quality? It's not like a phone call, right?
Oh, no. Yeah. Phone calls, you have to remember that one of the problems with phone calls is they actually add noise to the phone call because it makes sure okay, think about it. You'll notice it when you think that you've been disconnected because it suddenly got really quiet. There's a little bit of hiss in there. That hiss is added so that you know that you're on the line. So when you use a phone call, you're always going to have a little bit of hiss because it is added on purpose. No, it's not a problem with the, and then what happens is that if it goes through a couple relays, it ends up getting really noisy because it's gone through a couple relays and each one of them is automatically adding a little noise. But it's there because people constantly don't know whether they're connected or not. So when you get into IP connections, whether it's Skype or Unity or ClearCom's, Agent IC, they don't do that. And so suddenly you have this nice clean audio and the Agent IC stuff is crystal clear. I haven't done as much with the Unity. I think it's very clear. Brian, I don't know if you can compare and contrast the two of them together.
The Agent IC is band limited to 7K, which in the overwhelming majority of broadcast situations is still totally fine for program audio. 7K is way up there.
Yeah.
The Unity solution is not. It's actually a full bandwidth 20 to 20, if you will, signal. It uses an Opus codec, which is a wider bandwidth codec. So at least on paper, the Unity comms is actually a better sounding solution. For comms, I think they're equal. But if you were trying to use it as a backup for your program audio, I would probably lean towards the Unity.
There you go. Chris, next question.
Okay, first of all, Gavin Roberts asks top 5 items to put in your crikey bag, and we're going to talk about that in 20 minutes, so we'll skip that one. What options and then Tom Lynch says, what options do folks recommend for live broadcast of multiple users in conversation? I'd start with a mixer.
Say that one more time. Can you read that one more time?
I'll read it verbatim. What options do folks recommend for live broadcast of multiple users in conversation?
So I guess the question is whether that's a remote, whether we're talking about a remote connection or whether we're talking about everyone in one room. Given that we're talking about remote connections,
it's vague. Yeah. Yeah.
So when we talk about users, I'm going to say it's remote. So there's a couple different ways to do that. I hinted on what I do. I think I posted it in the Discord in show your behind the scenes or whatever, or show your kit or whatever. We do it one connection at a time, and then we build a cross point, in the system to give me the maximum amount of the ability to do all my ISOs and to have complete control. And we tie comms back into it and everything else to make that work. But there's a lot of easier ways to do that. Memo has Memo Live or Memo Call. Then you have vMix Call. You have live. You have to Skype on a TC1 in TriCaster. You can get Live Stream Studio has its own calling system, and most of those are using Skype for obviously for the Skype TX box and the TC1, whereas the Skype TX will do up to 4 connections, the 4000 will, and the TriCaster itself will do 2. I think the vMix, Leland, correct me if I'm wrong, vMix is just as many as your computer can handle, right? As far as calls go.
It can, in a sense. It depends on how you look at it. But to get a licensed caller using the vMix call WebRTC website to bring callers in is limited to 8 callers on the Pro version, which is the $1,200 full-on suite, one time only. So that's what you're going to have to pay up front to get those 8 callers. But there's other ways to bring callers in as well.
Also,
and just to mention a couple. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, just with regard, because I see other questions as well, commenting on StreamYard and bringing in people on the fly kind of thing, and you can kind of cover all those in a general statement. WebRTC platforms like that, Stage 10, BeLive, StreamYard, and then like Alex just mentioned, all the software, OBS, vMix, Wirecast, etc., all have a certain place. The software that you're going to find on the SaaS sites, or software as a service where you pay monthly, online, you're going to always run into connection issues. So always keep that in mind. You're going to be having to deal with the bandwidth problems because you're not going to have much control over it. It's very cookie cutter. You can add graphics, but you're going to look like just the other guy next door that's using the same platform as you. So if you want any kind of real branding being used properly, or coming out with your own look and unique ID out on live streaming, use the software and learn how to use it properly, and then come in and brand yourself. Don't just use somebody's take on what you should look like when you come out on a live stream.
The one of the things that, anytime you're going to do that, beyond the how to actually do it, just remember that we prep, like we have a conversation, every conversation, we'll spend half an hour to an hour with every person prepping them, making sure that we find how to get the best internet out of where they're at, find the right lighting. Yesterday, we were prepping people and moving them all over their house. Like, okay, let's look at this background. Let's look at that. Can you move this over here? And so that'll happen a week before. I will say the best time to prep people is the week before, not 2 weeks before. You don't know if they're really going to be where they said they were going to be. 1 week before, you can usually have a better chance of that. You don't want to do it the day of the event, because oftentimes getting set up is stressful. So they get all upset because they can't get it quite right and it doesn't sound right and you're tweaking everything. But if you do it the week before, by the time they get to the event, they forgot about that. Now it just works. So it's really a great thing to do is kind of get that ahead, minimum of a day before. The week before means you can send them things. Oh, I wish I had another camera like the one we're doing one next week. And we sent them cameras and mics and things, and does it sound perfect? No, but it sounds a lot better than it did before we sent all that stuff. So by planning out a couple weeks, you can get ahead of it. Sky, and then we'll move on.
Last week, Shannon gave your protocol list. I was hoping we could see she was going to have a PDF or something.
Yeah, Shannon needs to post a link to our questionnaire that we send people, and so she's hidden down there. So that's a reminder for Shannon to post that. So yeah, absolutely. Yep, absolutely. Next question, Chris.
Wes Jordan, he wants to convert his HDMI for longer cable lengths. What are the preferred ways of doing that?
There's both Ethernet as well as fiber, as well as SDI. So you can convert it to SDI. So you can get an HDMI to SDI converter, and that's going to give you what you need to go another 150 feet. You can go Ethernet. I don't know what the length on Ethernet is, but it can go a fair distance over Ethernet. And then what we do, if we have to convert HDMI, we're converting it to fiber. So we're converting it to light and then converting it back to HDMI when we get to the other side. And Blackmagic makes a great little rack mountable boxes that do that. So you just stick them on either end and you push it back and forth. But we also use yellow bricks for that type of thing. Of course, that's the kind of the heavy approach to it. A lighter approach would be either SDI or Ethernet. Does anyone have any other ways that they extend HDMI? Go ahead, Jeffrey.
A small little trick or hack or whatever. If you get yourself an NDI Connect Spark, you can use that as not only as an addition, but also it can be a failover. So if that fails, you can use the NDI signal.
Great. Anything else? Any other ideas? Okay. Next question, Chris.
PR40 versus a PR30 for home studio VO.
You know, I've never owned a PR30. I have no idea. Like we've had so many. It's it's a smaller version of the, or it's like a less expensive version of the PR40. I have never. I've had so many PR40s that I've never. You know, I was like, oh, well, it's less than the PR40. I like the PR40. The PR40 is not crazy expensive for a mic, and so I've just never shifted down. So I don't know what the difference is. Bill?
So here's my formula for you. The things that matter on a voiceover. Number one, script. Number two, whether or not your performance makes sense. Number three, the space you're recording in, is it treated and the rest of that? About number 42 is the microphone you use and the chain you use for recording it. That's the order of priority. If you've got a good script and you have somebody who can bring it to life, you can put them in a phone booth from 1965 with a cassette recorder, and even though you're going to have to fiddle with the tape noise, you can get a believable, useful voiceover out of it. The rest of this is all just tweaking at the edges.
Yeah, and you know, I a friend of mine is a character designer on a lot of the Star Wars stuff, Ian McCaig, and I'm trying to get Ian to come on and talk to us about drawing because he's so much fun. Anyway, but one of the things that he always says, if people complain about their pencil, I know they're not very good. You know, like he was just like, you know, like now we all tweak little things. You know, when you start to the thing to know when we say that is that when you start skiing, it doesn't matter what boards you're standing on, right? But after a while, the length of the skis and the quality of it and whether there's any scratches becomes something as you start to hear it. You know, as you start to hear different things. I mean, definitely, I have choices of mics. When I buy another mic, and I have, I don't know, 6 or 8 mics. I go into a store and I only go to a store that I can put headphones on and talk into that mic because I know what I'm listening for, and I'm going to listen for what I'm going to sound like. And it doesn't. I bought mics that are much cheaper than the ones that I thought I was going to buy because that was the one that I sounded really good in. You know, and so you know, so it's going to be a personal you know, thing for you as far as I would. You know, a lot of these folks, I think this is okay to say, is the return policy for a lot of companies is pretty good. I'm looking at a guy like, oh no, he's going to tell them the horrible thing. Is I am known for, you know, buying 5 mics and returning 4 of them. You know, so like I don't know which one, but that's kind of the thing. Like you don't know what you don't know about it. You know, like if you can't go to the store, part of buying it over mail is that you have to have that return policy because you have to understand, like, I'm not going to a store. I don't have a store. And so I have a tendency to buy, now the worst part, what my wife gets upset about is many times I have a tendency to buy 5 mics and then just forget and own 5 mics. You know, like it says, I don't always get them back inside of the range because I'm busy. So that's the danger of that. So you have to be very careful about how you set that up. But I have not done it to Guy. Don't do too much of that to Guy. But I've done it to B&H a lot. Like you know, like B&H is really good at returns, and Amazon's really good at returns. And I'm like, I don't know which one of these, so we'll just buy them all, and then I just return a bunch of them, and everybody's very nice about it. And I buy so much I have in the past 10 years bought so much from B&H and so much from Amazon. I don't really feel bad about it. So it's, you know, it's anyway, Jan, and then we're going to move on.
You know, I sell expensive mics, I sell lemons and stuff like that. And they always want to hear it. And they say, well, we'll return it. And I say, the only thing I can do is make sure that it's to factory spec. And once you buy it, you buy it. So, you know, nobody can guarantee the ambience or the quality of the sound. You can only guarantee the specs. And if you're going to buy a cheap mic, you know, when I'm saying cheap mic, anything a couple of $1,000, it's better to buy it from B&H, especially now. You could go, well, now you can't, but you could go into the store and they have every mic known to man there that you could try with a headset. So,
and you know, like
it's not a good
I
idea to return stuff like that, because a microphone, once you talk into it, it becomes a used, and now, especially now with COVID, that's a problem.
Right. Yeah. The thing is, I also, when I'm thinking about mics, I always choose the mic based on what I'm doing. Like when I do voiceovers, I use my Neumann mic. when I do this kind of thing where I want to move around a lot, I use the DPA. When I do podcasts with Leo, I do PR40. So I make decisions about what mic I'm using based on, and I know why. The Neumann catches my whole voice. The DPA gives me flexibility. The PR40 has a lot of off-axis rejection, so you don't hear my family. There's reasons for each one of these, that I use those mics for.
Just
Bill,
before
go
you
ahead and
go,
say one last thing. Yep.
Yeah, if I could do one question. The space, the reason I put the space you're recording in number 3, because you can get a great mic and you can put it in your bedroom. And if the room nodes are terrible and you're getting all sorts of phase cancellation and comb filtering, you can make a really, really good mic sound bad. So you have to study that kind of stuff too.
Well, and I think I've shown behind the scenes pictures of my space. I'm literally in a moving blanket box that I built. I literally built a box in my office that is moving blankets because my office is super live. And so I went and bought pipe at the hardware store, just plumbing, and I just hung, I put them on 4 C stands and just moved the whole thing up. And so now I have this kind of box that cuts down on most of my reflection. You hear more reflection here because I'm in a live room. But the first thing we do is try to figure out how do we get soft location, something that's going to suck up. Most of my offices that I've had in the past, I put sonics on all the walls that are exposed. Like I just sonics everything, and my wife wouldn't let me do that at home. So it's nice walls, and so I'm not allowed to sonics the walls. So that's why there's a moving blanket rig that's all around it. And so you're absolutely right, though. The environment is probably the most important thing. Go ahead, Chris.
Alex, you've awoken the sleeping beast. Now people want to know where you're going to start putting these recordings that you've alluded to possibly putting up.
I don't know yet. So the first thing we're going to do is I got to pull them all down. I've got some of them down, some of them not. We're going to pull them all down. We got to edit them all, get them all packaged. Stephen Kimbrough is going to help a little bit with that. And then, but within the next week, we'll start posting them somewhere. They're not going to be, I don't think they're going to be public. I think they'll be just for the members. So that we'll have a place for them that you guys can sign in and using the same emails that you signed in here. But I'm not going to make, we've decided what we're going to make public for now, which is the YouTube stuff. The other stuff is going to be stuff that just for us. So that but I'll have it. I promise that in 1 week, you guys going to keep me honest. In 1 week, we'll have a link for you of telling you where the first ones are. They won't all be up.
Shouldn't make that promise.
I'm going to promise that. I'm stepping out, and we'll go from there. Next question.
What are your thoughts on StreamYard? Can you also recommend any similar cloud-based all-in-one streaming platforms?
I think StreamYard's probably the best one so far, and I've come a long way with StreamYard. StreamYard for a long time was horrible. They've grown a lot. 8 years ago or 10 years ago, I've been told by Leland that it's a completely different thing now. It's not the same. You don't need. I got it, Leland, but it's not the same thing. But it is. I think that probably if you need to do something web-based, you need to be able to add graphics. You need to be able to do those bits and pieces. I think that it's probably the best platform to do that in right now. It also has, if you have access to things like LinkedIn Live, it's an easy place to pass the content through to get to it because it doesn't have an RTMP input. So I think that StreamYard is a really good platform to experiment with and play with as far as a web-only solution. I will say, what I would say is it's more of a webinar platform than a it's more of a webinar platform than a broadcast platform in my eyes. And what I will say about that is that I think we need to stop thinking. I was thinking about this on the drive in this morning that we just really need to stop thinking about calling anything a webinar. Mentally, I think we need to start thinking about calling them something else, like a scalable conversation, a broadcast, but stop calling it a webinar because, seminars were kind of bad in the first place. And then we made them we have a poor, webinar is a poor facsimile of something that barely worked in the first place, and so it's like we took something that didn't taste very good. And then we, took out all the things that were good about it. And then now we think that that's okay, and it's just, webinars are not great, and like, we need to stop using slides, for the most part. I mean, you can use slides here and there as if we use slides as visual things that we want to show you of how that works, that's great. But we should never use a slide. And if we're here and we're all having this conversation, we should never use a slide as our notes, ever. Like, you know, like if you have lines and lines of text, you're wrong. Like, I'm not going to like say that it's like, it's not okay. It's not okay. It's stupid. Like if people are reading those lines, they're not listening to you. You know, you should, if you get a deck that you're going to present against and you understand what you said by reading the deck, if you're going to send the deck to somebody and have them read it, put a bunch of text on, but better yet, create a PDF that actually is a nice little book that they can read, because that would be more effective. You know, that's what I've started to do. Like, some people expect decks, right? Some of my clients, like if they don't get a deck, it doesn't exist, right? So I make them a little deck, you know. But for a lot of people, I'll go into Pages and make a great PDF document that looks pretty, but it's just prose. I mean, if I'm going to do prose, I might as well just really use the right app for that. But I can't tell you how many times I look at someone's deck on a big stage with a bunch of text going, how did someone not pull them off the ledge before they did that? This is like people don't love them. You know, I get that they don't know what they're doing, but people don't love them if they tell them that that's okay. You know, and so the thing is you don't want people reading anything. You want to use the deck as a visualization of what you're talking about, so that I can't do it with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a picture that makes sense. That is what is great in a slide deck, is to have those pictures up and ready for you, but not text. Anyway, Sky, one thing, and then we're going to probably get ready to switch.
The two words I want to throw into your what are we doing is somehow the word story and somehow the word content seems to be what we're doing, what we're creating.
Yeah.
Story and content. I threw those
but
up.
We need to kill off the death by PowerPoint. You know, like we have to find a way to destroy that, you know, and make it go away. Okay. Go ahead, Colin.
I'm sensing you don't like slides. Is that right, Alex?
I don't mind slides. When they're done well. Like I think that you go to a place where it's really well designed and there are images that are explaining something while you're talking. They augment what you're saying. I use slides. I use a lot of slides. But if you look at my slide decks, there's almost no text. You know, there's like little sections of things, and then there's animations, and there's little, things that pop up. But my slide decks are on white. Like, I don't do anything, you know, like anything. If we make anything complicated, I'm always like, that's kind of, to me, like super artsy or weird backgrounds is kind of like lens flares. You know, it's like and the other thing is as a note, as someone who builds 4 or 5 decks a week, it's so much easier. And I build all my decks in Keynote because the auto alpha works really, really well. And so you grab images that you want, and the auto alpha pulls them off, but they're all those images over white. And so if you build your whole deck over white, everything just blends right in. It looks like it looks much better. It looks much better over white. It also, if you have a client that prints these things, it doesn't use as much ink. So those are a lot of my things, because I make so many of them, I see them printed out, and I used to do them over dark, and I would see these like wet paper that would come out of the printer that my client are printing them on over black. And I realized that I'm literally destroying the environment. Like single-handedly shortening my kid's lifespan, you know, by
that was a
sending
long
dark
walk.
text.
I think the question was about whether to use StreamYard or not.
I know, but I think that I often take things off. So things because the problem is what StreamYard is often there. The reason I said that is StreamYard is often a support mechanism to use slides. Like that's that, and so what I'm saying is that StreamYard is as good as it gets in that.
That's necessarily the case.
Okay.
I don't know.
I don't know if I've ever seen anything.
Yeah, you've never seen anything else. So what I've always seen StreamYard used for, and this is where they evolved to, as Leland said, they were a questionable product for quite a while. They evolved to a usable product at the perfect moment when Google decided to finally kill off Hangouts on Air. And so they've replaced that mechanism for, mid-level podcasting or Hangout discussion events. For example, in my case, you have a lot of people in the 3D printing community that will get together and discuss their activities for the week and what they've built and that kind of thing. They'll bring in speakers,
and we got
over a period of an hour or something. But it's most useful as a call-in management mechanism on the in the mid-level tier.
And the thing is I think that there's a point where we want to have a software switcher. There's points where we want to have hardware switchers. I think that if you don't have those things and you're not ready to do it, I think StreamYard is the right way to go. And I do think, to your point, I do think that it's a great platform for web-based conversations. It's just that what I get brought into when it's only my experience that I get brought in and someone's doing a slide presentation on StreamYard, and I'm just like, but when it's used well, I definitely see the possibility of it. And if you don't have the tools to do other things like that, I think it's a great platform for that. And so I would definitely experiment with it. And we'll do some more stuff. We'll do some more experiment with it. It took me a little while to come around because all I could think of was the old StreamYard, and I literally had so many scars that were so deep from the old StreamYard. Out of hand, I wouldn't even consider it because it was so bad. And now Neil, who's somewhere here sometimes, showed it to me, and I was like, that's not at all the StreamYard I remember. This is actually pretty cool. so anyway, I haven't gotten to play with it that much, but I do think that it could be something that a lot of people could use. Now we're going to shift gears to Crikey. So one of the things we started talking about was that a lot of us take Crikey kits, and a Crikey kit, to define it for everybody. A Crikey kit is something that we all, most of